The Israeli newspaper Haaretz released a startling investigation over the weekend, or I guess startling to people who didn't believe the many Palestinian eyewitnesses and medics and doctors who had been making the same case. But what the Haaretz, and we can put this element up on the screen, investigation revealed is that what we have been seeing and what we have been hearing about is the result of a policy coming from at least some commanders in the field to deliberately shoot toward starving Palestinian aid seekers at and around the aid centers related to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Amir Tibon is a columnist at Haaretz. We're still joined as well by Dave Smith. Later in this interview, we're going to talk about Amir's latest column on Netanyahu and Trump. We want to start here with this Haaretz investigation. Amir, how has it been resonating in Israel? This feels like a piece that broke through in a way that some had not in the past, but maybe that's just my hope kind of coloring my analysis.
So, first of all, this is an investigation by three of my colleagues, Nir Hasson, Yaniv Kubovich, and Bar Peleg, and I want to give them the due credit for the hard work that they did here. And it's mostly based on interviews with soldiers, with people on the ground who are eyewitnesses to the very disturbing reality that has developed around the question of the aid distribution in Gaza and all these incidents where you have people being killed from gunfire. Now, the investigation doesn't say that this is exclusively the IDF. It doesn't rule out the claim that we've heard from the Israeli side that also Hamas has targeted people near the aid centers or some of the workers, but it definitely includes testimonies from soldiers who say that they were given orders to fire live ammunition, let's say at least in the vicinity of the aid distribution centers. And I really think it's just worth reading. It's a very, very strong article. There's been strong pushback against it. But what's interesting to note is that at least I've seen one reporter, military reporter for, I think it's Channel 14, which is a very right-leaning pro-Netanyahu media outlet, who basically, after denouncing the investigation in Haaretz, said that some of the orders and some of the rules of engagement, when soldiers can open fire around the distribution centers, was changed after the publication of the story, which, it's a weird way to try to debunk something if you're saying it's not true. But by the way, it has led to changes in the policy. And from my point of view, I think what it really shows is that speaking now from an Israeli perspective, this is a war that has exhausted itself. I don't understand, as somebody who, Ryan knows this, lived on the border with Gaza before October 7th, still plans to go back and live in that part of Israel when the war is over. I don't see how this actually makes my family safer. There are other elements of this war, and war is always a terrible thing, but there are elements of it where I would read a story and say, this is terrible, but we were attacked and this is war and this is difficult. I think we're at a point today where it seems like the war really has exhausted itself, and these incidents are one glaring example of it, if you will.
Do you have a sense of the motivation behind giving orders like this? It's one of the things that's really dumbfounding to me is, you have so much pushback internationally on the destruction of Gaza and the treatment of the Palestinian people. What is the benefit of ordering IDF soldiers to shoot live ammunition into a group of civilians looking for food?
So first of all, I want to be very, very kind of cautious here with the wording, because I think what we know is that soldiers were given orders to fire, let's say, in that direction. We don't necessarily know that they were told go and kill people. But the thing here is that we are at a point where you have this war of attrition in Gaza. From the Israeli perspective, we are losing a lot of soldiers there. And a lot of them, young people who have been in this endless war situation since they joined the army, really. Their life is in danger. And when you are in a situation like that, a lot of times you're saying, okay, I'm gonna take extra precaution as a commander to try to protect my soldiers. And if the soldiers are in this kind of stalemate situation, there is very little movement. They see danger everywhere because Gaza today is basically tons of rubble and destroyed buildings, and they are being faced with explosives and landmines and all RPGs and things like that. So there's this heightened sense of danger, and that a lot of times will lead to decisions that, for me as a civilian, I look at it and I say, this is not leading us anywhere. But for a soldier in the field, on the ground, you're like, I guess, much more, considering, first of all, your survival. And so, and I think this is one of the issues at hand here, that when I look at it, I say, okay, this is, first of all, terrible. And second of all, I take it up to the government, not to the soldiers on the ground. Again, this is from my perspective. I take it to the government and say, what are you sending these people to do at this point? What is this achieving for us, for Israel as a country?
The tank shells, to me, add a layer of complexity, not complexity, like depravity to the order. Because I think no aid organization thinks that using live ammunition and firing warning shots at aid seekers is like an effective way to do aid distribution. Like, you've never heard of World Central Kitchen saying, no, we apologize for the 37 people that were killed at the World Central Kitchen. We were firing warning shots, and it turned out that we killed 37 and wounded 72. Like that never in the history of aid distribution has that happened. But even setting aside the live ammunition warning shots, firing shells towards civilian crowds is guaranteed to lead to, unless there's some miraculous situation where it lands nowhere near they fired, it's guaranteed to lead to casualties, at least significant amounts of people wounded. But I take your point that I imagine the soldiers are saying, who cares? Like, there's a risk to us, or we perceive a risk to us, and we might as well fire. And so,
I think again, you can look at the tactical question, Ryan. Why did this specific tank fire? Mm-hmm. And honestly, I wouldn't have the answer. I would assume it was because they felt in danger. But I think the bigger question is, what is happening with this entire experiment of changing the mechanism of the aid distribution, which I remind you, about 100 days ago, when the war in Gaza was renewed after the Trump-Witkoff ceasefire collapsed because Netanyahu chose to renew the war, this was presented, at least domestically, to people in Israel, but I think also a bit on the international scene, as the big game changer. You would have this supposedly neutral, but in fact very much aligned with the Israeli and American government's aid organization, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, take over the aid distribution. Hamas would no longer be able to control it. They wouldn't be able to loot and steal the aid. Everything would be run through these encampments. It would all be very professional. And a lot of aid organizations that have more experience working in Gaza and elsewhere in the world said, this doesn't make any sense. This is going to turn out into a disaster. And they gave several reasons for their warnings. One of it was, again, you would have Hamas on the one hand trying to stop it, and on the other hand, the Israeli soldiers were supposed to bring some layer of protection to these centers. And if you have any situation where they start firing at one another, this becomes a bloodbath. And I think after 100 days since the war was renewed, I don't see the big change on the ground. I see still people dying every day. I see the hostages still held by Hamas, and Hamas hasn't budged in their position that the war must end in order to have the release of all the hostages. And we are still seeing, by the way, apart from these aid distribution centers and everything that's happening around them, trucks coming into Gaza and being looted and people stealing. One of the explanations you're reading now in the Israeli media is that it's not Hamas doing the looting, it's local clans, or, sometimes clan can be a nice word for a crime organization. I'm not sure how that's better, honestly, but it's become a dystopian nightmare, really. And again, to me, it all comes back to the fundamental question: why is this war continuing? Why aren't we getting to a deal? that would bring back the hostages and end this insanity.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show, ad-free, and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.